Half-timbered houses are popular. They are often seen in historic town centers or on model railway layouts. An ornate beam pattern makes an impression, and half-timbered houses are often associated with tradition and homeland, with idyll and romance. It is not for nothing that people talk about half-timbered romanticism. In the past, the half-timbered house was valued as an inexpensive construction method, but the Roman architect Vitruvius was already ranting about it in the 1st century before Christ. Half-timbered houses, I wish they had never been invented. It did have advantages, however. Construction progressed faster and the costs were lower than with a stone structure. But wood burns like torches, and the beams work and cause cracks in the plaster. Wooden houses and then half-timbered constructions existed early on in the history of mankind. An important invention was the use of wooden pegs to join the beams together. This technique was already widespread in Roman times. The oldest half-timbered houses still preserved in Germany date back to the 13th century. Somewhat later, especially from the 15th century onwards, more and more decorative arrangements of the beams can be found. Ornamentation, such as carved motifs, was also added. Esslingen am Neckar is home to the oldest continuous row of half-timbered houses in Germany. It dates back to the 14th century and can be seen here. One building in this row is however plastered and shows no striking exposed half-timbering. Esslingen is also home to one of the oldest half-timbered houses in Germany, dating back to 1266. Half-timbered construction contrasts with solid construction, such as stone houses. It belongs to the skeleton construction method. Here, a framework of vertical, horizontal, and diagonal timbers is constructed. This framework contains the individual infill panels. They can be made of different materials such as willow withes, straw and clay, quarry stones, or even solid bricks. On the whole, half-timbered construction develops primarily where there are many deciduous trees. Depending on how the beams are joined together, certain structures are created. The simplest basic pattern has a so-called sill at the bottom. Two uprights rise to the right and left, and above them is the horizontal beam, the so-called nogging piece. A diagonal strut often runs through one or more infill panels for further reinforcement. The infill panel can be further stabilized at the bottom with a foot strut. If two such struts are placed next to each other, the result is a nice pair of foot struts. Whole figures can be created by combining different struts. With a little imagination, you can recognize arms and legs. One of these figures is called a man or even a wild man. St. Andrew's crosses are also frequently seen. The reign is reminiscent of St. Andrew, who was executed as a martyr on such a cross with two diagonal beams. Several beams are also often connected to form entire diamond-shaped fields, which have a very decorative effect. With many beam elements, the decorative function takes center stage. They do not primarily have a supporting function. This begins with the curved struts. Quarter circles, often connected to form semicircles, are very eye-catching. Individual noses are carved out of the beam and create additional elegant shapes. The same applies to all kinds of ornamental woods, where individual patterns are carved into the beams. Sometimes you are even lucky enough to come across charming carved figures attached to a particular part of the half-timber structure. The inside of the infill panel is not always filled with clay. There are quite a few buildings where bricks were used for this purpose. This is particularly the case in northern Germany, where exposed brick is used a lot anyway. However, you also have to be clear about one thing. Not all half-timbered houses are easily recognizable from the outside. In many cases, this timber construction method was used without attaching any importance to the external appearance. The facade was completely plastered over. In some cases, these were simple buildings where the arrangement of the beams was not important. It was therefore possible to use the beams that were available at the time and insert them wherever they were needed. In some of the completely plastered houses, the half-timbering was only exposed later in order to achieve a romantic, nostalgic effect. Let's leave these real buildings aside for a moment and take a look at half-timbered houses in the model. If you take a look around the Schreiber-Bogen program, you will come across a whole range of such cardboard models. A separate set of paper houses is dedicated specifically to the theme. It is the village with half-timbered houses and is in model railway scale N 1:160. It has a fine half-timber design and is not so difficult to build. In addition to some very different houses, there is also a small village church with churchyard and surrounding wall. There are a few more models in the same scale in the Schreiber range. These can of course be used to add to this village.